the tarot was originally invented or originally sprang up from the Bible. Most people associate the tarot with fortune telling and predicting the future, but that's not what it was originally invented for. It actually comes straight from the Bible, and the more you study it and the more you correlate it to the Bible, the more you see that it's undeniably true, that it is basically a pictorial, archetypal representation of biblical stories. It was probably invented for people like me who are more visual thinkers. I had trouble putting the Bible together in my mind. It's hard to understand. It's hard to see it as a whole. My knowledge of the Bible increased quite a bit after I started associating it with the tarot. The tarot is not a Bible in itself. The word is the word, but it's more like a complementary tool to helping someone understand the Bible. Images can be very powerful, and of course they don't replace biblical scripture itself, but the information that could be put in an image, like when they say an image is worth 1,000 words, it could be even worth a lot more than that, and especially when it's powerfully constructed like the tarot. Very powerful archetypes. Each card could hold many stories in the Bible. You could put them in different places in the Bible, and there is a system that I hope to explain in the next many videos, a system that is logical and mathematical, that once you understand it, that's the way it's been connected to the Bible. It's actually a perfectly logical and mathematical system. So these images condense information somewhat like, let's say, a medieval painting of the Jesus story. You could see how one image of Jesus could recall a whole chapter in the Gospels, and sometimes even more. Especially once you already know the story, the recall is immediate, and one image could make you remember a lot of details that might not necessarily be contained in the image. But when you mix the two together, when you put the images with the word, the information seems almost infinite. The condensing of the information, sort of like a microchip, how there's so much information in just a tiny little piece of plastic. They even have it in a lot of mythologies, like Norse mythology. They have this legend of a boat called the Skitbladnir, and it's this boat that some of the deities use that folds like a cloth and could be put in the pocket. And when they take it out of their pocket, they unfold it and it turns into a boat. And this boat always attracts favorable winds and leads you to where you need to go. I see it sort of like that, in that an image like the tarot could be condensed into a very tiny size and could guide you to where you need to go. Even in Revelation itself, in Revelation 10, they talk about John, who wrote Revelation, wrote about a little book that he's being shown. And he makes reference, when he talks about the book, he always calls it a little book. And there must be a reason why it was a little book. This is also for me a reminder of how a lot of information could be condensed in very small packages. And that is the case with the tarot. There's a lot of information in a very small package. The tarot is not scripture itself, and it doesn't replace it, but it's a way to bridge together the word and the image, to make them work in symbiosis together. Its main purpose then is as a mnemonic device to help us memorize big parts of the Bible. It helps you understand what is where in the Bible. But also it has a dual purpose of, you could also do a reading with it, not to get the future, of course, but as guidance. It's a lot of people who read the Bible, they often open the Bible to get inspiration. Well, you could do that with images, with a tarot deck, and get very profound, deep answers, because you could pull out, let's say, 10 cards for one question. And all these different cards are associated to different parts of the Bible. So you could extract so much information from just pulling out a few images. So there's mostly 3 levels to the tarot deck. The lowest level is the level that most people know, that's been used for centuries in popular culture. And that's what I choose to call the Pythagorean level. And that's mostly because most people associate the major arcana. There's many books that have been written about this. Most people associate the major arcana with Greek and Roman gods. And the minor arcana could be associated with numbers and elements, which is where I bring in the Pythagorean name, is in that it's the understanding of how numbers work and how they mix with different elements. So That's how most readers would use the tarot deck in association with number and elements and certain Greek deities and Roman deities. But that is the lowest level. There's 2 levels higher than that, and the next level is the Old Testament, and then the level after that is the New Testament, the highest level. The New Testament flies really high in the sky, barely touching the ground because it's so high. You have to understand the New Testament in order to unlock the key to everything else. The Old Testament is also connected to God, but also easier for most people to identify with because it's filled with flawed characters and has many archetypal characters in there that have different destinies. Because of their faults, they meet certain obstacles, and there's like 1,000 of those in the Bible. So there's a story for like everything we have that we go through in our lives could be associated to a character in the Bible. Whether an evil or a good character, they're all in there. All the archetypes are in there. So any situation we're in could be transferred to a story in the Bible, archetypally speaking. The major arcana and the minor arcana are at all levels. So the Pythagorean, the Old Testament, and the New Testament, they each play a part, but they play a part differently in each one. But you have to understand the New Testament in order to unlock the key to everything else. The New Testament shows you the order those should be placed in. And with that key, you could go back to the Old Testament and start unlocking what's in there. There's a lot to be said about it, and there's no way I could explain that very fast right now. But I'm just going to show how it correlates with the images as fast as I can, and then go back to the Gospels and show how those are correlated to the minor arcana. And hopefully after that I could move directly to the Old Testament and start showing how those keys of the New Testament open up the Old Testament. In the New Testament, the major arcana is connected to Revelation, and Revelation has 22 chapters, and we see that they fit perfectly in order. And the minor arcana describes the Gospels and the order they should be studied in. And with that key, you could go back to the Old Testament and start unlocking what's in there. And I'm going to be using for the videos because it's the most connected to our culture presently, and ever since it got created in the early 1900s, it's the Rider-Waite deck. I'm going to use those because not only did he make it appealing for everyone, but he obviously understood what I'm about to talk about. He got it, even though he seemed to have played dumb, but I guess it wasn't ready to be revealed yet. But he obviously understood, him and his artist, Pamela Coleman Smith, they obviously understood how it was correlated to the Bible because they're the first ones to popularize archetypal imagery within the minor arcana. Before that, you would see the minor arcana just as a number and an element. But they came up with every card of the minor arcana was a story in itself, with a character doing some kind of action. And that also connects to the New Testament and the Old Testament. And every card is connected to many stories at once. So I'm going to be using the Rider-Waite deck because it works so well. It's not personally my favorite deck. I use Marseille, which doesn't have that mythology in the minor arcana, but nevertheless, the Rider-Waite deck is the first deck I was using. And it's sort of like learning your ABCs. I've gone beyond that needing to have that always with me, but the images always come back to me. Even when I use a Marseille deck, the Rider-Waite deck is the images of the minor arcana are etched in my memory, and so I don't need it to walk around with it, sort of like a child in ABCs and CAT for cat. You don't need it after a certain time, but the imagery is always stays with you, and it always comes back to me.